Hello and welcome to another YouTube video. My name's Paul and I'm your host. In this video I've got a bit of a treat for you photography people out there. Basically I have two lenses here, which is the Sigma 150-600 Contemporary 6.3 lens, and here we have my beast, which is the 500mm Sigma Prime, the non-IS version. This is the 500mm APO 4.5 aperture EX-DG. So I've got a picture for you to see, and let's see how they do. We're going to have the Sigma Contemporary lens zoomed out to 500mm versus the Prime at 500mm. So let's find out which is sharper. Obviously this is the new Global Vision lens that's been released not long ago, and here is an older 500 DG Prime. Let's see at f8 at 500mm which is the sharpest. Welcome back again. This is the second part of my video, and basically we're in the office and we're going to be comparing some images. So basically what's first up is we're testing the Contemporary 150-600 6.3 max aperture, minimum focus of 2.8 meters. We're testing this out at 500mm, which is probably where it's strongest. I think it's at 600mm it sort of becomes a little bit on the softer side, but it's still quite sharp. But if you're interested, the sport version of this lens is a tiny bit sharper at 600mm, but not by much. It's so small you can barely notice it. Anyway, this is the Sigma Contemporary that we're going to be comparing to another lens, and I think this is a video that many people are interested in because they want to see how this lens compares to a Prime. So I've got something special to show you. So here is an older 500mm Prime lens, max aperture of 4.5, so it lets more light in, and basically it's the Sigma 500mm F4.5 APO EX-DG HSM lens. Has no image stabilization, which is a downside to it, unfortunately. But if you use, say, a monopod or a tripod, this should be fine. Unfortunately, the minimum focus on this is actually 4 meters, so quite substantially longer than the actual Contemporary lens. But I wanted to compare this with the Contemporary, and obviously the results will be similar to that of the sports lens as well. But I wanted to do this video to try and find out, is a Prime better than the zoom, especially a modern day zoom compared to an older Prime. So let's get to the examples, and hopefully this video will be helpful. So here we have the 150-600 on a 5D Mark II at 21 megapixels. So this is an example I have, and I'm just going to basically give you the examples as it comes out the camera. I've not basically modified the picture any way, shape or form in Lightroom. So let's get to the image, and I'll zoom in to about 200%, and it's up to you guys to make up your own mind. So let's zoom in. I focused on the eye and a single point autofocus to try and get a good test base so you can find out how good these lenses perform. So let's zoom in. We're at 50%, still looks pretty good and nice. Obviously the writing there is coming out. Incidentally, all these images are actually taken at ISO 100 at f8. So let's zoom in again. 66%. Still looks pretty good. 100%. I did try and focus on this area here, specifically the eye, but it's possible the focus was a little bit off. So let's zoom in again. At 200%, we're starting to see a bit of softness there when we get into 200%. But all in all, it looks like a good image from the 150 to 600. So let's see how the 500 prime performs on a full frame sensor. So here we are on the 500mm DG lens. Let's zoom in. It does seem to me that it lets a lot more light in, even at f8, compared to the Sigma zoom lens. 50%. So again, I was focusing on the eye here, trying to get as sharp an image as possible. Already though, it does seem to me, even at f8, because all these pictures are at f8 at 100 ISO, shutter speed was ranging between 250 of a second and 320 of a second. But it just seemed to have less of depth of field than the Sigma 150 to 600, because this area here is already a little bit out of focus. So let's zoom in again. 66%, still looking pretty good. 100% looks very good to me. Obviously you can actually see the hair strands with actually this 500mm F4.5 at f8, so I'm really pleased with the results, although I was trying to focus on the eye, but it's not as clear as I would have liked it to be, but it's still pretty good. Zoom in again. 200%. So let's go back to the other picture that we've got on the 150 to 600 contemporary. To my eye, the results are very similar, very similar. I don't know what you guys out there think, but I would say the results are very similar. So let's move on. So we're going to check it on APS-C sensor on the 7D, the original one obviously, 18 megapixel sensor. This is the 150 to 600. The focal length should be equivalent to 750mm on both lenses, based on a full frame. So let's zoom in. 50% looks pretty good. 66%, we're still looking really good there. 100%. Do think the focus has wandered a bit over here rather on the eye that was actually focusing on. But let's continue. 200%. Looking pretty good there. You can see the strands of the hairs at 200%. So the magnification, you know, on the 7D is really high on this one. So just keep in mind the actual zoom lens is set to 500mm. So let's have a look at how the 500 prime is doing. Again, we're talking around 750mm on a crop sensor. So let's zoom in. 50%. 66%, still looking very good. 100%. I think the focus system is acting a little bit different, where the focus is more here than it was there on the actual 150 to 600. So it's possible there is a bit of a focus issue in terms of what's being in focus. But remember, all these pictures are at f8, so it's up to you to determine in terms of where the depth of field is actually going on that. 200%. You can still see a lot of the strands of the hairs on the actual bear, and it is really resolving some good results. Let's just go back to the 150 to 600. If I'm absolutely honest with you guys, I think it's very close between these two lenses. Which is the better? You make your mind up, guys. You know, leave some comments in the description. Tell me what you think. Do you think the prime is sharper than the actual zoom, or is the zoom sharper? Because obviously you're talking quite a lot of years between these lenses. Let's go back and let's zoom out on the 150-600 on the 5D Mark II, because I want to analyse the actual bokeh. So let's look at the 150-600 on the Mark II. The bokeh looks really smooth. I have no complaints regarding the bokeh, because you know, at this magnification you do tend to get a lot of you know, bokeh coming through. When you're using extreme zoom lenses, bokeh is less important because of the sheer amount of distance behind the actual subject. But if we have a look at it, it's really nice. Nothing's distracting in the background, and I don't have any issues or complaints regarding it. Let's have a look at the 500. Again, you know, I would say the bokeh is very similar. Just so you guys can find out what about the actual file data is on the actual exposure. So 150-600 on the 5D Mark II, 500mm. It's 320th of a second at f8, ISO 100, because I wanted to get as clean as a result as I could. So obviously that's the 150-600. Now we go to the 500 and look at the file data for that on the 5D Mark II. We're at 250th of a second, ISO 100. This is still set to f8 on the 5D Mark II. I get the feeling that there's better light transmission in the 500 prime, even when it's set to f8, than you're actually getting on the 150-600. So for low light situations, I still think even if you're using the same settings, the 500 prime is slightly better. In terms of a depth of field, I think you get less depth of field from the 500 prime at f8 than you do with the actual 150-600, because if you look at that writing, it's just behind the bear here. It's slightly sharper on the 150-600 than it is on the 500 prime. So I think those are the main differences, really. So it's up to you to make your mind up. Let's just have a look at the bokeh before I finish this video off. Let's move in there at 100%. Move in there 100%. So the bokeh is still really nice, and I have no concerns regarding it. It's up to you which you feel is the better bokeh, but they both produce really good bokeh, and there's no issues that I can see regarding the quality of these lenses. So it's up to you which you think is better. Let me know in the comments. Basically, if you're wondering about weight, the contemporary is about 2.1 kilograms, and the actual prime lens 500 DG actually weighs 3.2 kilograms. Incidentally, it weighs the same as the sport lens 150-600. So thank you for watching, and I hope you found this video informative, and bye bye, see you later.